Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We're just letting folks wander in, so we shared that video at the beginning. My name is Suzanne Aisha Stone. I am the Executive Director of the International Wildlife Coexistence Network. But when all this stuff started, I was just an intern. And so we've got some people that were part of the original Wolf Reintroduction team here tonight, others that are going to be joining us that were there to record this event in history. And then the Nez Perce tribe, Marcy Carter's here with us tonight, representing the tribe and their role in the Idaho Wolf Reintroduction, and then later the management plan. So today is the 30th anniversary, almost. Tomorrow is the actual day when wolves were released in Idaho, but they landed on the ground here in Idaho in on the January 12th, actually. And so we're going to talk about the events that led up to that, and then also what occurred that delayed the release of those wolves, and then talk about what's happening with wolves today. So with that, I would like to give you guys just a little bit of a story behind the scenes of what happened. And I'm going to start off by explaining a bit about what it was like being an intern. So when I was working for the Fish and Wildlife Service and was still in college, my big job was to go out and monitor, look for wolves, try to find tracks and scat and all that sort of thing, and investigate the areas where we were seeing them reported around the state, because wolves had been essentially eradicated in Idaho in the early 1930s. So this was in the late 80s, early 90s, and wolves have been gone for quite some time, over 50 years from the state. We had the occasional disperser that came in and would um, maybe get seen, reported, and we had hoped that those dispersers would end up helping to jumpstart the population as they did in northwestern Montana. But in Idaho, we had problems with um, very few animals coming through, and then also some of the animals that did show up in the state ended up getting killed, and so we never had enough to have a solid population. The wolf was one of the first species listed in 1974 under the Endangered Species Act. So that's when the wolves coming to Idaho gained their first protection. And I was interning for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I had 7 different agency bosses, including the Nez Perce tribe, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, Idaho Fish and Game, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, State Department of Lands, I think. So I learned all the acronyms pretty early on of what the different agencies were and how they worked. Um, and then one day, when we were out investigating um, the reports of a wolf pack being found up in the Bear Valley area, uh, I was able to actually stumble across something that was pretty cool. And it was the first recorded pack of wolves coming back to Idaho. So I'm going to start off um, with sharing a little bit of that story with you. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about how wolves came back to the state. So let's see here. So one of the techniques in looking for wolves, monitoring for them, is howling. Wolves are very social creatures, and I've heard them howl back to planes going overhead, to cows mooing. So you don't even have to be in a perfect howler. You can sound pretty awful sometimes, I think, but they do like to respond to howling. And it was in an area called Bear Valley here in central Idaho. Um, we had searched this area many times because we'd had lots of reports of wolves there. And and then one night we had this amazing thing happen. I was getting ready to start building a little campfire and did some howling. And I remembered what one of my friends from Mission Wolf had told me, that you have a really nice technical howl, Suzanne, he said, but you lack a message in that howl. So when you're howling, think of what you're saying. So I thought, well, okay, I'm out here by myself on the edge of the Frank Church Wilderness area, and I'm going to just ask, where are you? And then I howled and howled, and nothing responded. And that was typically the answer we got, was nothing responding. And then I went back and set up my camp, and a couple of minutes later, um, started hearing something pretty unusual. Can you guys hear that? Glenn, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you hear? No?
No.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I can optimize it.
Can you
There we go.
shrink it? Yeah.
There we go. How about now? So suddenly the woods just filled with this sound of this entire pack howling. And we howled back and forth with each other for, oh, it seemed like a long time to me, but I'm sure it was just a couple of minutes. And the wolves, we started going back and forth. And this is the first time as an intern I was able to actually hear wolves, have them howl and respond to me. So I was so excited. And then a couple minutes after we had the serenade going back and forth and everything sounded so great, the wolves did a warning bark, short bark bark, and they suddenly went quiet. And so at that point, I thought, oh, they must have figured out that I was there. But a couple minutes later, I could see the headlights of a truck coming down the road, and knew that they had actually spotted that vehicle long before I could hear it. They heard it. Um, so in Idaho, wolves had been a native species forever in our state. We at one point had thousands of them, and in Montana, I believe alone, they counted somewhere around 10,000 that had been turned in for bounty through the early bounty programs in just a couple year period. So we had a lot of wolves, tens of thousands of them across the Northern Rockies before they were completely eradicated. And most of that was done by poisoning, shooting, bounties, that sort of thing. So when we learned that there was a possibility of restoring wolves, that action took place over many decades, people working very hard, different organizations coming forward. The wolf had endangered species protection, but it didn't necessarily have the authority to start bringing them back. And that's where the act came together with a lot of folks from Congress, a lot of nonprofit organizations, and moving forward and trying to bring these wolves back. But nobody more than this woman was responsible for bringing wolves back to Yellowstone National Park. This is Renee Askins with the Wolf Fund. So if you are a big advocate of having wolves in the park, you've seen them before, this is the woman that you need to thank. And when I met her, I was still just an intern. She was leading meetings with a lot of NGOs at the table, a lot of government officials at the table. And it was the first time that I had actually seen, a woman in such a position where she was directing such a large and visionary type activities of bringing wolves back to this region. And she was amazing and is still amazing, and was a wonderful mentor. So Renee Askins is the person you need to keep in mind. She wrote a wonderful book called Shadow Mountain. And if you haven't read it, please get it and read it. It's a real tribute to her. This is one of the regions where we were able to go to get wolves once the authorization was given. And this is British Columbia, I believe. The first year was Alberta. This is the Pink Mountains in BC, which was the second year. So the wolves were reintroduced over a 2-year period. A lot of them were captured with helicopter darting, and Carter will talk to you a lot more about that. And I'm going to not steal his thunder. I'm just going to keep going. And then there were a lot of people that either volunteered or the first year, most, I think everyone was from different government agencies between the Canadian government and the US government. So all of our wolves came from either Alberta or British Columbia because we didn't have enough wolves in the Northern Rockies in order to secure their recovery. So these wolves would have and have walked from the areas where they were in British Columbia and in Alberta, all the way down into central Idaho. We've had GPS and satellite collars that show that wolves have been able to transfer that far on their own and still be able to go back and forth. So they're really wide dispersers, and that told us that these wolves were the right wolves, certainly to have. They were what was left of the remnant population of the western wolves. So this is at some of the field stations where the wolves are being processed. They're sleeping on those on that mat in front of you and in the pictures here. Um, and and then this is what we faced in Salmon, Idaho, which was a lot more of a tense situation. Once the wolves were coming back, we were waiting for them in the city of Salmon, and there was a lot of very strong tensions around the, the community. Um, and I'm jumping around a little bit here because we've got other people that are going to cover parts of this, but I want to make sure you guys get a full background here. This is the intern being really excited about being there, being part of all of this, and kind of living the dream of seeing these wolves restored. There were different ways that wolves were brought back. The most of the wolves coming from Canada were shipped back through the Sherpa plane here, and this is the first four from the Idaho wolf reintroduction. You can see that there's tribal elders there on the right who are doing a blessing ceremony for the wolves, and then other times wolves were anesthetized. They're in the helicopter, and then they're being carried out into the backcountry to be delivered. And this took place over in Idaho over a large, I think we had six actual reintroductions over that 2-year period. Um, this These pictures are from Idaho again. This is the Nez Perce elders that are doing the blessing ceremony, Horace Axtell and Alan Pinkham. And then the collars here are ones that the students decorated from all over the state of Idaho. I sent their collars to these different schools, and you can see in the bottom, it's hard to make out. It has the word chat chat there. And Chat Chat was the wolf that the Nez Perce Nimipu students decorated the collar for, and it means older brother in Nez Perce. The other ones came from other parts of the state. The one that says Moon Star Shadow is from the Blaine County students, and then there were other collars from different parts of the area. So those collars came up. We were able to fit the wolves with the collars, and then I believe that's Chat Chat coming out of the kennel there. This is what was going on over in Yellowstone, and Yellowstone was certainly the primary focus for the reintroduction. So a lot of the media, a lot of the attention, and still is very focused on the Yellowstone National Park. So this is Molly Beatty and Bruce Babbitt, who have the head of the kennels here. Molly Beatty was head of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, though from Idaho, and then Bruce Babbitt was Secretary of the Interior at the time. The wolves from going to Yellowstone were kept in enclosures for quite some time, several months. The wolves coming to Idaho had a very different um, experience because they were brought in by kennels, and then the plan was to immediately release them. Now, that was the plan, but what happened is when we arrived in Salmon, Idaho, and started experiencing some of the tension in town, the wolves had landed up in northwestern Montana. The weather started turning bad, and the plans to just take the wolves in by airplane weren't viable anymore. So they ended up having to move the wolves in the back of a truck. And Glenn's got some pictures of that, so I'm gonna not share those right now. And it took another day for them to get there. And by the time that day had elapsed, we had a court order that was issued by a federal judge that prevented us from being able to release the wolves. So the Yellowstone wolves were able to make it to the park. They were able to be put into the enclosure, but the Idaho wolves were still in their kennels. And we had no idea at that time what was going to happen, if we were going to be able to release those wolves or if they were going to be, we just didn't know if they'd survive if the judge didn't lift that order soon. So on the 12th, they arrived in Idaho, January 12th. On the 13th, this day, we were worried the entire day of what was going to happen. And then late the evening of the 13th, that order was lifted, and we were able to get wolves back into the um, and release them into the national forest. So I wanted to give you this quote from Levi Holt, who's with the Nez Perce tribe. And I'm sure you can read it, but he says, in the time of Wolf's absence, the tribe had suffered. A vital link in our sacred circle had been broken. Levi was one of the elders that had worked with wolves, worked trying to restore them, and really was part of the celebration of bringing them back. And I also wanted to do a acknowledgement to the chairman, Pete Hayes, who was one of my mentors, and who was part of the visionary work trying to bring the wolves back, but also getting the tribe involved in their management after the state of Idaho refused to manage the wolves. So with that, I am going to dash back here and turn this over to Carter Niemeyer. Carter is a longtime friend. He is retired from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He was one time the state director of the wolf program for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Idaho. He has a Bachelor of Science and Master's degree in Wildlife Biology from the University, Iowa State University, Idaho. And he was a state trapper when we met, working with the Montana Department of Livestock, and then became later a district supervisor for USDA Wildlife Services in Western Montana. He was chosen as the wolf management specialist for USDA Wildlife Services, covering the states of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and was pretty amazing in his work. He ended up saving a lot of wolves that many people had thought might be involved in livestock losses, but that Carter was able to maintain a really strong record of forensics and be able to help people understand what was a wolf-related incident and what was not. So I really appreciate the work that he did and the courage that he had. It was a tough job. He has written his first memoir, Wolfer, in 2010. If you haven't read it, it's a wonderful book. His second memoir of Wolfland was published in 2016, and I've heard tale that he's working on a third one. He lives here in Boise, Idaho with his wife, Jenny. So with that, Carter, I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne. Can you hear me all right there? It's a privilege to be here tonight and talk to everybody. First of all, remind you there's a wolf moon shining out there tonight. So if you're forgetting about that, remember it. A little bit more advice I was going to offer you up to is around this place to stay calm and stay cool. We play Dances with Wolves theme songs in the house every day, and try it. It's some of the best soundtrack I've ever heard. So tonight, I think rather than go into all the details about the wolves on the ground, I'm going to reflect back to 1994. And I had been part of the planning stage for the wolf reintroduction, helping with the environmental impact statement. But I was a wildlife services guy up in Montana, and as I was watching the plans unfold, I was thinking, I sure wish I was part of that. I hope I'm not missing out. And so I understood that things were happening in Canada and still waiting for the phone to ring. And I finally heard from Ed Bangs, called me up and says, hey, Carter, we want you to head up there. So without going into a lot of detail, because there's so much to this, Valpagene Asher who had helped out with the Fish and Wildlife Service here in Idaho at the time. She met me in Helena, Montana, and the two of us were first two biologists to head up to Canada. And all I had was some phone numbers. So we drove in kind of a light snowy blizzard all the way up there. And as I rolled into Hinton, Alberta, which is where I was supposed to go, I got a room at the Terra Vista Hotel with this phone list. So I thought, well, I'll call this one trapper that everybody was talking about and find out how much I missed out on and if there was anything left to do. So I got on the phone, talked to a guy named Wade Berry, one of the trappers north of Hinton. He immediately gets angry, cusses me, says he doesn't know what's going on, hadn't gotten any calls. He was irritated and said, I guess we'll just go back to killing wolves. So I said, Wade, calm down. Then I checked with the pilots who got the contract. They were located over in Cranbrook, British Columbia. And they chewed my butt because they said, yeah, we got the contract. Nobody's told us a word. They didn't know anything. So by the next morning, I drove out to Wade Berry's, run into a bunch of trappers out there who told me to pack up and leave, get my butt out of Alberta. And through that engagement, Wade Berry had his partner come in the house with two dead wolves and said, you know, this is what we're going to do to wolves. You guys told us you were going to pay us, told us you're going to work with us. Nobody's told us a word. So I won't go into the gory details, but so I'm sitting in the kitchen at Wade Berry's, getting my butt chewed by all these trappers who are threatening me, intimidating me. And on top of it all, that afternoon, his partner brought two dead wolves into the house, I guess for shock and awe. Well, this is really the environment I'm used to. So I wasn't really intimidated. I was a little disappointed. Make a long story short, ended up getting into a wolf skinning contest in his living room that evening, drinking choke cherry wine. We got plowed. I skinned a wolf, showed him I could do that. Stayed on his couch that night in my bloody clothes, and he wouldn't let me drive back to the hotel because I really wasn't in any condition to drive. So anyway, next morning I went back to his place after changing clothes in town, and our little skinning contest won him over, and he told me I was one of the guys now and defended me when all the trappers came back to start up the arguments again. Make a long story short, that afternoon we went out and checked some snares and caught the first two wolves that he would have probably killed if I hadn't been there. They were alive and right on the edge of Jasper Park. I immobilized them, cut them out of the snares. We took them to Hinton and got them secured. Well, so we got that part going all within about a day, but I also found out from the pilots that not only had they not been notified, they had no facilities, no hangars, no fuel. They didn't know how they were going to operate and catch wolves in Hinton when they lived in British Columbia. Wade Berry, amazingly, the same trapper, and his wife, Carrie, worked at the Alberta Forest Technology School in Hinton. They said, gee, Carter, I think we can help you out. So believe it or not, that afternoon, he introduced me to the director of the Forest Technology School. And I told him some of the needs we had, and he goes, well, right here at the school, we have a hangar that would hold two helicopters, just exactly the space we needed. I said, what would you think we should do about fuel? He says, well, we have airstrips all over this region. With some of the airstrips had 50 barrels of fuel oil sitting there that worked for these helicopters. No worries there. And he said, where are all your people going to stay when they all get up here? And I said, well, I guess we're all going to pile into the Terra Vista Hotel. He says, why don't you stay in our dormitory rooms? So believe it or not, we knocked off those needs all in a matter of a day. So I called up the pilots and told them that I had a hangar and that I thought we had fuel. So within a couple of days, the pilots flew over from Cranbrook, British Columbia, had no idea where they were going. So I told them fly into Hinton and I'll be standing in the middle of town by this building waving at you. It worked. They came in, circled the town. I stood out there at the forestry center at the landing strip or the landing pad in front of the hangar. They spotted me, came in, landed their 2 helicopters and said, hey, this hangar will work beautiful. So what are we gonna do about fuel? So I introduced them to the director and they sat down with technology school folks, marked all the airstrips. They were all remote airstrips and went to flying each one of those. They found them and did a inventory of how many fuels or how many barrels of fuel were sitting there and GPS them all in. And then start moving into the dorm buildings. Next thing they go is, how are we going to catch these wolves? And I told them, we want you to fly us around and dart them. These guys were all net gunners. So spontaneously, I told them, well, I can dart if you guys can fly us around. So within a day, we put together this kind of group of folks. And I got in as a gunner and flew with the 2 helicopters and we went out, cruised around, found a group of wolves, darted one of them by pure luck because we were really not very gunner pilot compatible at the time. But anyway, I got a wolf, hit it in the foot with a dart. That one became a wolf called Carter's Hope, which eventually got caught and went to Yellowstone National Park as part of the, I believe, Soda Butte pack. And because we caught him that day, he was the wolf we used to find the pack. So here we went in a matter of a couple of weeks from total mass confusion to it was almost meant to be. All these folks pulled together. We got by all of the unplanned inconveniences that we encountered. Went ahead and marked wolves in, I believe we marked 17 wolves in 10 or 12 packs. The pilots went out, GPS'd all those collared animals. We got that all done by Christmas 1994. Set the table, and then we all packed up and went home for a break. And all returned in January 1995 and went ahead and caught the wolves that were reintroduced that year and amounted to 14 wolves in 1995, 17 wolves in 1996. Those 31 went to Yellowstone National Park. And then we moved to Fort St. John, British Columbia in 1996. We didn't even go to the collaring stage there. There were so many wolves in BC that we used spotter pilots to locate random packs and caught them with a helicopter. That year we got a total of 30, well, over the 2 years, we put 35 wolves into Idaho, hard released them out of their kennels, and 31 wolves into Yellowstone. So I guess that's what I'm going to just say is that There were a lot of things that we thought would stand in our way at the time. And of course, as Suzanne mentioned, we had judges trying to stop us once the wolves got here to the United States. In any event, between 2,000 and 3,000 wolves are running around Western United States now, based on those 66 wolves we caught.
We have a question for you, Carter.
I'll end it there, and we can talk about other things later.
We've got a question for you that maybe it'd be easier for you to answer. Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
So someone had asked about the soft versus hard release and why that was chosen. I answered it in the Q&A, and everybody remembered that there's a Q&A on here. So if you have a question, feel free to pop it in there. But Carter, why did they release them, do the quick release in Idaho, and the soft release in Yellowstone?
Well, I'm not the brains behind the plan, but I think what wolf managers wanted to do was try two different methods. And we did it the first year. It would be kind of like, let's see how it works. And if one method failed and the other succeeded, then maybe we'd change our plans by the second year. But both methods, and I'll define hard release was simply bringing them into Idaho. These were mostly non-related wolves. They were wolves that we caught in Canada that didn't necessarily have pack members to come down with them. And so Dr. David Meach, Steve Fritz, and others kind of sorted the wolves out in Canada and took all these single and unattached wolves and decided we'd mark those and send them to Idaho. And we'll just turn them loose like dispersers and see what they do. In Yellowstone, the soft release plan was building these acclimation pens about an acre in size, build them around natural waterways, and turn the wolves into those pens and acclimate them and help them calm down and get familiar with the area. And these wolves that went to Yellowstone were mostly related. They were family members. Case like the Nez Perce pack, it was in the entire family we caught in British Columbia. So to make a long story short, the acclimation pens worked okay. They held the wolves together, but something that I've learned and that we've learned over the years is that when you relocate wolves, they very seldom stay together, even family groups. So we had mixed results in Yellowstone. A lot of the wolves just packed up over a few days' time and moved out of the pens and scattered. They just broke up and went all directions, kind of a starburst effect. So their behavior wasn't all that different than the ones in Idaho.
Yep.
But the bottom line was both methods did work. The wolves moved around and eventually tracking the radio collars, wolves found wolves. Radio collared wolves found wolves, and it also proved even more so that there weren't a lot of uncollared wolves running around Idaho.
Yep. I think part of it too is that Idaho is so much larger. I think you can fit 5 Yellowstones into central Idaho wilderness. It's that people don't know, or at least a lot of folks don't, that Idaho holds the largest contiguous wilderness and national forest land in the lower 48 states. So they had a lot of more room in Idaho. So thanks, Carter. And I'm going to move over here to Marcy, and coincidentally has the same name, Carter, but it's her last name. Marcy, thanks so much for joining us tonight. One of the most important things for me was as an intern working under the guidance of the Nez Perce tribe. And so I'm really grateful that you can be here. Marcy is the deputy director of the Nez Perce tribe watershed division for the Department of Forestry.
Fishery.
And sorry, fisheries. Thank you. I should let you introduce yourself. She was with the Idaho Wolf Project. We got to meet a long, long time ago, though, in 1997 through 2002. And so I'm really thrilled that you can be here. Can you tell us about the Nez Perce tribe role in the Idaho Wolf Reintroduction and the subsequent management of wolves in the state?
Sure. So I came onto the project in 97. Of course, wolves hit the ground in 94 and 95. Um, the tribe did enter into an agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service at the end of 1995, I believe. And the tribe had developed our own recovery and management plan, which was approved, which gave us the authority to manage wolves in Idaho. We did take over management of wolves at the end of also 95. So in 96, I think we did have a project leader on and a technician, and they kind of established at least, the process for what we were going to do on the field. I think that first year we ended up having 3 breeding pairs, maybe, and I think there were some pups born that next year. So the tribe would go on to, of course, lead the ground effort for wolves in Idaho for well over a decade. And when I came on in 97, there were six of us that came on with our project leader, of course, but the 6 of us were the crew that went out and did the field work. Of course, the goal to recovery was to have, I think initially it was to have 10 breeding pairs that had 2 pups that survived to the next year for 3 years in a row. And then I don't know when that changed, but the rule did change to just 30 breeding pairs with, I think, 2 pups that survive to January. So I believe we met that 30 breeding pairs probably in 2000-ish, 2001. But the work we did on the ground was we basically conducted monitoring both by air and by ground, of course, using radio telemetry. All these animals were radio collared. We collected data at each rendezvous site. We took, collected data on their home sites, litter counts, what they were eating. We collected all kinds of scats and food, and they might still be in our freezers. I don't even know, but and then we trapped, once we got trained by our friend Carter, we were able to, trap and collar wolves as needed. Yeah, so that was, I was on from 97 until 2002 when I had my first baby and I had to give it up. But it was the best time of my career. But yeah, it was exciting, not only just being out in Idaho and experiencing, of course, Idaho, but, working with professionals like Carter, like other Fish and Wildlife Service personnel, and then even working with the folks in the state that were not supportive of wolves, being able to try to build those relationships with, grazers and livestock people. And yeah, we did kind of build some relationships and friendships actually, and, turn some minds around, from actual hatred of wolves to, thinking that they were okay. But yeah, as far as the management post, I'm not in the wildlife department anymore here, but I do still have an opinion. I do think that the tribe, should have continued to kind of push on the state as far as how wolves are being managed here. And we didn't, which is really, disappointing since, we did all the work. The tribal members are pretty proud of what we did, but now we're on our heels. But did I answer your
Yeah,
question?
thank you so much. And the tribe stayed in place doing the management for wolves up until the time that wolves were delisted in
Yeah.
2010. You talked about the objectives for recovery changing, and so the original was 10 breeding pairs of wolves with 2 surviving pups to the end of the year, and then having um, that in place for 3 years running. And I think we reached that target across the Northern Rockies in 2005. But when they changed, and at that point there were, I think it was 1,200 or 1,500 wolves. We were somewhere really close to that. And then, but they changed it to 30 overall. And I think that made it easier for them to delist the wolves, which set a lower bar for their recovery. But either way, yeah, you guys had the lead on that for such a long time. And I appreciate the work that Carter did at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, because he was also on the road constantly
Yep.
out there trying to keep wolves alive. And then the other person that I wish was here tonight that we lost was Rick Williamson, who was with USDA Wildlife Services, and he was a true icon of the Wolf Project as well, and had worked very hard to help keep them going. It strikes me that there was so much heart in the people who were working to try to keep this going, that it wasn't a matter of like an 8 to 5 job. It never was. We were working weekends. There was, the phone was always ringing, and there was always somebody answering it and willing to jump in a helicopter, willing to be up in an airplane. I do remember a reporter passing out in the airplane because Bert loved to do the corkscrew stuff when he was monitoring for wolves. And I thought, well, okay, that's pretty tough. But the most beautiful country in the world that we were working in, and the wolves did great. They did their job. We're getting quite a few questions. I think I've got Marcy. The question is, are you working now? What are you doing? What are you doing now?
Oh, so yeah, I had to give up my position on the Wolf Project when I had my first baby. And then I just moved over to the wildlife department here in the tribe and went to graduate school. And then I moved over here to the dark side in the fisheries department in 2011, where we are restoring habitat for endangered fish. So
That's my cat, believe it or not. Okay, sorry.
So yes, I still work. I still go out in the field, still look for wolves. All those years I was on the project, it was really hard to see wolves, even with a radio collar. And, now I don't see any sign when I'm out there, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing, and I know Carter is too. I
Yeah.
think we'd like to spend some time during this call talking about the status of wolves in the state, what's happened to them, especially since 2021, when the state began a year-round open season on them. Another question for you, though, is why did the tribe lose their involvement?
You're making me think back. I think it was because the state of Idaho, I think, was finally willing to step in after, and maybe Suzanne or Carter, you guys might be able to help me here, but I think that the state of Idaho wanted to finally have a hand in management, under this, I think under their predator program. And so they kind of fought to get into the program. And so then I believe that the areas were kind of even separated, like the tribe had maybe the Clearwater and the salmon, I'm just guessing, and then the state had, their part. But then the funding, once wolves were actually delisted, the funding went away, and we don't have that kind of funding to keep on doing this type of work. It's very expensive to have people on the ground, have, that type of intensive monitoring. So yeah, the funding just eventually dried up.
Yeah, and I think the tribe is working on a new wolf management plan, potentially for maybe ceded lands. So I've heard some rumor that there was some action moving there. So it'd be wonderful to have you guys back involved as well. If that happens. So, all right, Marcy, thank you. Let's move over to Glenn. I think I've got him next on our schedule here. And Glenn, are you with us here?
I'm
There we go.
reappearing now.
Yay. Okay.
Okay.
Glenn, why don't I have you introduce yourself? You have worked for so many different hats in so many different places, but you were the Time Magazine reporter or photographer that was on the ground. Yeah, photographer that was on the ground during the reintroduction. And I think you have some pictures that you were going to share with us too, ones that I've not seen before. So I was excited to see that. Tell us about what you were doing and what brought you to the reintroduction area, and what you remember about the story.
Well, I freelanced for a lot of magazines back then, and Time Magazine was one of them. But I had relationship with the wolf programs that actually co-authored a book earlier.
That's right.
With Northwood Press before the release ever happened, and I actually shot. I specialized in environmental stories, but I shot a lot of stuff for Time Magazine. So anyway, I was on assignment for Time, and there was a fair amount of media there at the time, not a ton. But what I remember was mostly chaos, because first of all, we got there and then the injunction happened. So we were all sort of hanging out in Salmon, not knowing what was happening and how long, if it was going to happen. And we were on deadline. And of course, this is in the days of film and before the internet and everything. So he physically had to get the film to places. And then an ice storm hit while everybody was waiting for the wolves to be come down from Missoula. When the injunction was lifted and they finally did come down, an ice storm had hit, and it was like an ice rink in Salmon. And what I remember, when we finally got, everything was like, we're finally going to go. And initially we thought we were going to be flying, I think. And then it was like, no, we're not going to be able to do that. We're going to have to drive. So we get a car, and a bunch of us from the media, we were all in this one car, and finally it's like, it's happening now, and you got to go. And Doug Pizak was the photographer from the Associated Press, and I think somebody was holding us up who hadn't come yet, and he ran out to get him out of the restroom or something. It's like, you'll do that later, I'm sorry. We're all watching, and he comes running back out, and as soon as he gets out of the building, I mean, he hit the ice, and Doug Pizak was a big guy, and he went completely horizontal and just kind of hit the ice and bounced. But he was a trooper, and he jumped up, and we all jumped in the car, and we drove away, and we got in the caravan going up the Salmon. And then I was thinking there was a good chance that the trucks were all going, with the wolves, were going to slide into the river.
Yeah.
You probably remember that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when they stopped, people were literally hanging on the sides of the trucks to move because it was so slick. Anyway.
We told everybody to take their seatbelts off, because we were right against the river, and if anyone had slid into the river, they wouldn't have had time to take off their seatbelt before they would have been in that icy water. And so, yeah, that was incredible, the amount of ice on that road. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. We had to hire a snowplow to get us even up to that point where we could get toward the Frank to the Corn Creek campground. So yeah, I remember that well too. That was scary.
Yeah, Yeah, it was a pretty sketchy situation. So those are my memories. I can go ahead if I remember how to
Yep.
transfer this over onto the share. And I'm going to share that. And I'm going to go here. And is that sharing? I'm still on, right? Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay.
Yay. There we go.
So this is this is on the 13th. This is the injunction was lifted, and they finally got down, and the wolves were brought into the hangar here, and then there was a ceremony. I think this was the Lemhi Shoshone. Yeah. And see if I can get here. And then this is unloading the 4 wolves. And this is right at Corn Creek. And then this is Dave Hunter, who was the veterinarian, and Ed Bangs. You can see they had to prod this wolf to encourage it to leave.
Yep. That one took some prodding. She didn't want to go. Yeah.
And I think this is the same one.
Yes.
Heading across. And then after that, of course, there was, I mean, it didn't take all that long. There's only 4 wolves, and they go pretty quickly. And then, so there was a lot of celebration. So this is Ray Farrar and Dave, the veterinarian. They were all lighting victory cigars. And
Dave Hunter, yeah.
Yeah.
Who
And
really wasn't supposed to be there, by the way.
yeah.
So,
And this is you.
yeah,
And,
it's me.
yeah.
Yeah, in tears. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I've got. And if I recall correctly, back to this. I don't think the photos ever ran in time. I think we completely missed the deadline. So I think the photos were eventually published in some places, but I'm pretty sure we missed the Time magazine deadline.
Yeah. Yeah, that was incredible. And we also had I was writing with Agent Steve McGowan from the Fish and Wildlife Service Law Enforcement, and they had been told that there was going to be a potential ambush on the road ahead of us. And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't mention that to
Okay.
the reporters, but yeah, that was part of the reason I chose to ride with him, because I looked around to the other 10 or 15 cars behind us, and I knew no one else was armed, and he was, so I decided to go with him.
Oh, interesting.
We had chat in the back of his vehicle, and then of course, the other 3 wolves were behind that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, thankfully that didn't happen. So
Mhm.
it was really way more peaceful than we expected. But that road was also pretty impenetrable. I think we were the only ones to get back there, certainly that day.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was it was memorable just for the drive.
It was good that you were there, and thanks for recording it. That's pretty awesome. So
Yeah.
so Roy, are you guys with us, Roy and Sally? Because Glenn just showed pictures of you, and I know you're probably joining us by phone. And let's see if we can hear them. And I know Roy's going to want a copy of that picture, Glenn. That's pretty awesome. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Allison, what do we have? Do we have Roy and Sally as well?
Yep, we just need them to unmute.
Okay. While Roy is working on that, I'm gonna just read you guys a little story of what was happening when we were sitting there in Salmon. And Roy, if you get on, just stop me, and I'll continue this afterwards. But Roy and Sally and I, we were working for the Wolf
Are you
Education.
there?
Hey, there we go. Yay, there we are.
Hey guys,
Hey,
how are you?
hey, Suzanne. Hi, everybody.
Good. Yay.
Technology's not my long suit.
No. No, Roy, I was going to read them a little
Yeah.
bit of what happened, what we were doing in Salmon then. So let me go through this just quickly, and then you can jump in. We got
Sure.
there on the 12th, and Salmon, Idaho is a really rural town. It's in central Idaho. It sits in the Great Divide to the east of marking the Montana state boundary, and then the massive Frank Church, which is why we were there, which is the River of No Return Wilderness. The Lewis and Clark expedition crossed that divide at Lemhi Pass, about 30 miles to the southeast of Salmon. And another thing that the town is known for is Sacagawea was born not far from the town of Salmon. While we were unpacking the car that Roy had driven up, we learned that the American Farm Bureau had filed a temporary legal stay to stop the reintroduction to both Idaho and Yellowstone National Park. And Glenn, along with the other reporters, had already gathered at that hotel and were looking for a lot of answers. But we didn't have a lot of answers to their questions at the time. I had worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and since I was the closest thing to an agency person at being up there at that point, that position of having to talk with the press fell to me. And we had, I think, 3 or 4 meetings each day with the press, and then trying to get just a feel for what was happening. We weren't sure when the wolves were going to arrive, how they were going to arrive, and if at times. We were worried about the wolves. We were worried about the drivers in transit, and of course, the tension in Salmon was mounting the whole time. When I was the second day explaining at the third briefing that day that we didn't know what the court actions would, if they would allow the wolves to be released or require them to be euthanized. I had gotten that news directly from Molly Beatty, the national director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and she'd called me to check on our team as our concerns grew for the safety of our everyone involved. Molly was wonderful because so much attention was on Yellowstone that she even remembered to help care for what was happening in Idaho. I think was just above and beyond. The wolves that were heading from Great Falls to us in Salmon were being transported. We didn't know how, and we had probably 15 reporters in the room, but I noticed this man standing in the back who was wearing black. He had a long trench coat on and was carrying what looked like a leather Bible case underneath his arm. And the Bible seemed heavier to me than what it should have. And I started getting worried about, potentially what might be happening in the room. And that's when I saw you, Roy, watching him as well. And I could tell you were already on.
I did.
Yeah. I was measuring the distance between me and the door and that man. And that briefing ended.
I like to tell everybody.
Yeah.
I like to tell everybody I was being brave, figuring out a way to tackle him if I had to, but I was really looking for the door.
Yeah. And as we tried to leave the room, he came up and intercepted us, and I was holding my breath, and he said, Suzanne, I'm Agent Steve McGowan with the Fish and Wildlife Service Law Enforcement. I'm here to help you. I didn't know whether to hug him or hit him at that point, but I was really happy he was there, and relieved that we had someone there from the agencies that could help. He told us at that time that the wolves were going to be arriving soon. He was just ahead of them, and that they needed a safe place to hold them until the judge issued his decision on the Farm Bureau's litigation. So we spent that afternoon, if you guys remember, assessing, buildings where we could find some place to safely keep those wolves. And we found that little hangar that Glenn just showed at the little airport on the outskirts of town. It was a good spot. Yep. So what do you but I still remember feeling like we were outsiders, and really back then that town had kind of a forlorn feeling to it. It was, people were already very tense about that endangered trout shutting down the local mine, and they were pretty angry about us being there. So what do you guys remember about that day?
Well, Suzanne, I remember when Steve McGowan stopped you at the door, and I was so relieved to find out that he was with Fish and Wildlife. I said, "You've got a gun in that book, don't you?" And he's looking at me, "Yes, I do." I said, "Good, stick close, buddy," because it was scary. It really was. I remember you and I and Sally walking downtown one night, and we walked by the Farm Bureau, and they were having a big celebration and a big sign in the window that says, "Kill all the wolves and the people that brought them here," and everything. And I know we tried to keep it light, and we've always joked about, if it wasn't for my cowboy boots and my cowboy hat, and an old country singer like me, we'd probably they thought we were one of them. So, but the thing that I remember, I think most is, of course, the tension of the whole situation, and the final relief of seeing those 4 wolves in the 4 cages in that hangar. And it's a memory. I know we went to Dave Hunter and said, "Dave, what can we do?" And Dave said, "Well, they're going to need a drink of water." So Sally and I ran downtown and picked up 4 blocks of ice, if you remember, and gave them their first drink of water in Idaho. And of course, then the next day we loaded up and headed up that icy road that everybody talks about, and Glenn mentioned too. And it was a dangerous road. It's one that nobody would take if you didn't have to. And for some reason, it seemed like the thing to do. It didn't. The fear went out of it for some reason, and I can't tell you why.
I agree.
Ironically, we passed on that road. It was about 16 miles to Corn Creek from Salmon, and the road ran along beside the river. The river had, if you remember, it had big ice jams in it, and some of the concrete, it looked like concrete under construction or maybe being destructed, and sticking up out of the ice, and it 2 feet thick and large, as big as a room sticking up and everything. And ironically, 10 years prior to that, Sally and I had been married a little over 1.5 years or so, and she hit me with the idea that we were going to go on a Native American vision quest, of which I made a big deal about. And
Yeah, sadly.
but we went. But when we went in with the wolves, we went right past the place that we had spent a 10-day period in the wilderness, across the river on a gondola. It was a open air gondola that we went across on a cable and spent time over there. We went past that to release the first wolves in Idaho, and the adventure was unbelievable, especially for volunteers, because we'd worked so hard. And if you remember when I first met you, Suzanne, you were about ready to have Sierra, your first daughter, and we got to know you, and we just became acquainted, and we kept running into each other, and then you invited us to go to the first meeting, and it seemed like the second meeting, all of a sudden we found out we were on the board of directors, which should have told us something right off the bat about the project you were about to get us into. And
Yeah.
from then on, of course, I had just gotten back from Nashville and recorded some music, and I was all full of myself and told Kent Weber from Mission Wolf and you that I was going to write some songs about wolves, which we eventually did, and we traveled around the country doing that. But the adventure of the release, to get back to that, was unbelievable. And I just remember that the absolute silence after the last wolf was released. The first 3, when we released them, one of them, Dave Hunter had terrible. He had to get him out of the cage with a long hook and a rope collar. And all 3 of them headed down this river into the wilderness, except for the last one. And for some reason, that one decided it would go the other direction. And once it was all done, and they were all released, I remember Rocky Barker was a reporter for the Statesman, a wildlife reporter. He slipped on the ice and fell. He fell hard, and I was helping him up. I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I hurt myself," and he did. He was walking backwards and crippled, and it was so treacherous, but it was such a thrill. And then everything got quiet. All the press was over on one side against the hill. And then we were releasing the wolves right there where they could go down towards the river and across the old campground, which was covered with snow. And I remember when it was all done, there was a silence kind of fell over, almost a spiritual thing happened. And one of the wolves howled. And it was the most chilling, it was like a message and a memory of something that you'd forgotten that happened, that you didn't remember, but it's something. And it howled again, and then another one echoed it. And it was like, whoa, what a thrill, chills up and down the spine. You remember, Suzanne, tears to the eyes. It was a magnificent thing, what we had done. And to have all the people that were there, Carter and everybody that was just such a big part of everything, the whole thing, it was amazing for a couple of volunteers like Sally and I that we just became our passion, and still is. It hasn't changed. As Sally, Ed, I'm doing all the talking.
Just well, I'm used to having you do
Oh,
that.
thanks a lot. I knew it.
Sally, we're both used to that, Roy.
Sally and I did. I'm so stupid. Sally and Suzanne have ganged up on me since the very first day they got together, and I don't know why I put up with it. I'm a dummy, I guess.
No choice.
Sally, some things don't change. So,
Like
what,
I say, an old.
What I remember was so much about just, this was my first encounter with wolves, wild wolves. I had been working to help hybrid and domestic, and had worked with Kent Weber with Mission Wolf and all that, and it was wonderful. But this was my first time, and it was with Chat. I was in the hangar with them the night before the release, just watching them.
Yes.
And they were silent. They were almost motionless. They seemed like they were on high alert. They were listening and watching every move, from things that were going on in the hangar, except for Chat. And he, this big, large male. He had the most beautiful kind of green gold eyes and thick golden gray fur. He was beautiful. And Chat means older brother in Nez Perce and Mipu, and the students had decorated his collar, and it was just incredible. And he came, instead of cowering, like the others had done, they were kind of holding it back in the back of their kennel. He stepped forward and he looked at me, and I just felt like you could feel the weight of his gaze. I was so struck by the intensity and the just deep, bright intelligence that he had. It was palpable. It was like there was just this intensely powerful and wild being. And I had never had an experience like that before. Never experienced that.
I understand.
But animal, yeah. And that connection it's like, it's totally separate from what we feel in this modern human world. And it made me think
Yes, it is.
of Chairman Hayes, his story about the connection to wolves. And, he had served on that Central Idaho Wolf Recovery, Wolf Interagency Wolf Committee for years. And he was my mentor and boss. But I remember
I met her for all of us. He was a very wise man.
Yeah, he told me that the spirit of the wolf still lived in the mountains, and that by bringing wolves back to the land, that it would restore a part of the Nez Perce, the Nemipu's people's own spirit. And I thought, this is it. This is his dream is unfolding right in front of me with these wolves.
Yes,
And that was a big part of what we were bringing them back for, because we were trying to restore something that had been such an injustice, having all these animals just wiped off the landscape with really no reason that they should have been so persecuted. And
we were blessed in many ways, Suzanne, from the standpoint that the Nez Perce tribe, the debt of gratitude that I have for them and for the people and for the brotherhood and the relationships and the wonderful things they taught us. If you remember, you're looking at Chat and those eyes and whatnot, the feeling you got. If our dear brother Levi, Black Beaver, was still with us,
yes,
he had a word for that. He says, "It's just plumb spiritual." And it was, anytime something like that would happen, he'd jokingly, "plumb spiritual," and he's right, it was. And the Nez Perce people were so great, even with the building of the center that we did later on, but the release and the volunteers and the knowledge that they gave us at meetings and welcoming us into even tribal council meetings, and the brotherhood, the friendship was so beautiful. I don't think the wolves would even be here if it wouldn't been for them.
Yeah.
I know it took a lot of us and a lot of dedication, and you, Suzanne, deserve, I don't know how much gratitude from everybody, because you have been unwavering in your dedication to this issue, and it's just plum catching. So now that's all the good stuff I'm going to say about you. So that's it.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah. You know, I'm looking through a lot of the questions that people are asking, and I think that we're going to have to get to the point of talking about also what's happening today, which is really hard to talk about. We
We got to do it.
the state, especially in 2021, passed legislation that rather than allowing wolves to be managed like bears and mountain lions, which was their commitment, that they would allow for wolves to be killed in every single way that you could kill any vermin in the state. And they are killing them 365 days of the year. There's bounties on wolves, and it breaks my heart. I have never thought I would live to see bounties in this day and age. And we're talking like thousands of dollars per wolf. And even pups, pups in the den, and taking animals that don't even have their eyes open yet. It's shocking to me. I work on wolves all over the world, all over Europe, Scandinavia, even Israel, the Middle East, all of that. There is no place in the world that it is a worse place to be than Idaho if you're a wolf. It is the greatest persecution of wolves here in the state. And I thought maybe all of you could reflect on this with me a little bit. We had such hope that wolves would be integrated and be managed in the same way that the state manages black bears and mountain lions, which was the promise. The commitment from the state was to do that. We have 5,000 mountain lions in the state. We have 25,000 black bears, but they won't allow more than 100 or so wolves, and they don't even know how many that the goal is 500 or down to 150, whatever it is. When you don't have a way of accurately counting the wolves and you're killing them 365 days of the year, and you have no real protections for them, it's an eradication program. And I just never thought we'd live to see that happening again, this Old West approach to predator eradication. How do you feel about being part of all of this?
Well, I feel that we're back to before ground zero, when we first were doing education for schools, we were doing education for people. We were talking about wolves, and we were talking about the glamorous side, the spiritual side, the beauty side, the necessary thing, and it seemed like we were teaching people, and they were listening, and there was a humane feeling about wolves and the tragedy that had happened. And now it's almost like it's a cowardly hunting thing that they do, and it's the mindset that somehow we've got to go back to ground zero and change that. And I don't know how to do that for sure.
Yeah. We've worked as hard as we can with this past administration. It isn't just our organization, it's been all of these NGOs trying to get federal relisting for the species, because when wolves were delisted in 2010, the commitment from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the time was that if any state allowed for unlimited and unregulated killing of wolves, that the Fish and Wildlife Service would immediately pursue emergency federal listing of that species. And we've reminded everyone all the way to the top of the Fish and Wildlife Service of that commitment, but they never did anything to change it. They just allowed for this to happen. And a lot of people are asking in the questions right now is, how do we help? What can we do to help protect them? What do we attribute this hatred to? And it's it is so much worse now than it was when we brought wolves back. I thought it was bad when we brought wolves back, but the division, the polarization, and the outright just unwillingness to listen to science, unwillingness to accept what provable facts are, just chasing propaganda and allowing that to set the standards for management decisions. It's stunning to me um, how far we've lost in time since the time that we brought wolves back. It's changed that much, and I've been warning folks over in Europe.
And I agree.
Yeah, warning people in Europe to
Oh,
not follow in our footsteps, to don't get comfortable with the slippery slope that in Europe, there's efforts to try to remove protections for wolves, and once that starts, and you don't have a good program in place to help protect them, it's impossible. And here, Idaho, we started the Wood River Wolf Project in Idaho 18 years ago, and it is still the premier coexistence project testing non-lethal tools and methods in the state and across the Western United States now. We have 20 to 25,000 sheep in our project area every year. We use non-lethal methods, air horns and livestock guardian dogs, and working with herders, giving lots of equipment to them. We've got people on the ground. We spend less money using these methods than they do in the neighboring counties where we have, sheep dying, 10 times as many sheep dying there, and they're regularly killing wolves in those areas. So we know we can coexist with wolves, and we know we can do it in Idaho. We know we can do it in the worst case scenario where it's heavily mountainous terrain and very remote. But it seems that the will to coexist is not as strong as the will to destroy. And I think that is, it speaks a lot of where we are politically in the state of Idaho. So I think being able to maintain the Wood River Wolf Project and show people, and we're showing people all over the world, that you can coexist with wolves. Here's how you do it. It's really not hard. And this is where the most vulnerable sheep are the most vulnerable livestock on the landscape. If we can do it here in Idaho under these kind of conditions, it can be done anywhere. And I think, that's the thing that we've got to be able to show people, is that we really need to have these different approach to how we work with nature.
Suzanne is also correct. What you're saying just hits home right on the button. And the thing of it is, Doug Christensen always had a comment. He said that the most important ingredient to the success of any endeavor is the I want to. Somehow or the other, the I want to protect wolves, the I want to protect the environment, the I want to is lacking. It's really lacking. Other than spreading the word the best we can, fighting it the old-fashioned way, word of mouth, and in every possible way, and legally and whatever. I just know of no other way to do it. But we've got to change that into the I want to. I want the wolves to be here. Economically, it's a great tourist draw. It's it should be something that's glamorous. There should be a license plate with a wolf on it. They don't do that. They won't do it. They'll put every other critter in the world, including snakes, on the license plate, but they won't put a wolf. And it should be just the opposite of that. How we do that, I'm open.
We got close this year. We were working with Senator Cory Booker, who helped pull together and introduce in September the American Tribal Heritage and Bison, Grizzly, and Wolf Act, which would have restored federal protection for wolves, bison, and grizzly across the board, across the United States. It's very similar to the Golden Eagle Act. I'm hoping we get another shot at that at some point. We knew it wasn't going to happen right away, but I think it's going to require us all to look at changing the paradigm in terms of how we manage wildlife, that it's really not.
Oh, yeah.
It can't
Oh,
be
yes.
about just hunting and fishing anymore. The loss of biodiversity around the world, I mean, it's stunning. And, you know, many of these places we've replaced the native fauna and flora and species with livestock, with agriculture, and the earth. You know, we've changed it so much that we're seeing this incredible loss of biodiversity now.
Oh,
So yeah, yeah.
it's
So
you know, I guess you know, the inside of me says, well, wait a minute, hold it. You know, the only way we can lose this fight is to give up. I don't feel like giving up. And there's just no other way except to find a way to do it, to continue on, and to you know, increase our endeavor, increase our whatever we have to do.
Outreach,
Outreach,
education.
And, you know, Carter. I remember when Carter was just cussed because he was a wolf killer. He was the environmental people. And it dawned on me all of a sudden. In fact, I stood up at a meeting and stuck up for Carter one time and said, wait a minute, you're talking about a guy that saved more wolves than he's ever killed. And and these are the people. Carter knows how to do this thing. He's got to be taken aghast by it. The Nez Perce tribe, the fisheries, the people, we need them all. We need to all join again and get moving, get this thing sold.
yeah, I think people don't know what's happening here. I think that's a huge part of it, is that we're not.
I agree.
We've got to get the word out. I think even the people in Idaho have no idea of how severe,
No.
how much persecution that these animals are under. And I think they'd be appalled to find out what is considered to be legal here in the state. That, you know, it's horrific. It's such a loss of integrity in wildlife management, that it's almost like it's a lost cause in that way. That I think we have to start over almost with something new in place. There's a terrific group that we're working with now called Wildlife for All, which is working at the state level across the country. I think, you know,
What's it called?
It's called
Wildlife for All.
Wildlife for All. It's an awesome group, and it'll be a long time before they're going to be much help in Idaho, but they're certainly uh, taking big strides in other states, and that's important because we really need to change the whole system. It's set up to fail for these species, and you can tell, you know, where we are right now. We've done so much in terms of biodiversity loss that that was the reason that we pulled together and created the International Wildlife Coexistence Network, so that we could help start building these new paradigms, start building these new structures and systems, and then reaching out to people around the world that are accepting that, you know, our relationship with nature is fundamentally flawed. It has to be changed, and that to me is the most encouraging. That and the students and the indigenous leaders that are coming forward and sharing that traditional wisdom, the traditional knowledge. I think those are the places where we have our greatest hope. And the only way we can lose this is if we give up. We can't give up.
Oh, we're not going to give up. We're not going to give up. No. Mm-mm. You know, I've always thought that the greatest thing that ever happened for wolves in Idaho was the management from the Nez Perce tribe. Because they managed them to protect wolves. They managed them to do what you're supposed to do as a manager. They managed them properly. Granted, they had to take some wolves out. They had to kill some wolves. They had to replace wolves, but they did it with the idea that we're going to keep as many alive as we can. That's management. And then when that was taken away and it went to the state, that was the kiss of death, because the state never, ever was in favor of wolves. The state was always the bad thing for the wolves. We had a few people in there. I don't even know any of them anymore, but the federal government was our friend when it came to wolf management. The Nez Perce, they were our friends when it came to wolf management. The state was never a friend.
Yeah. Carter, you have any thoughts?
Ask me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the opposition was always there since day one. I mean, the history is clear that livestock industry, hunters, outfitters, all of those groups were opposed to wolves, and now they're sort of having the last laugh. I mean, I guess I didn't quite see it would be as extreme as they're doing these days, where there's no limit or quota. You know, technically one person could kill 100, 200, 500 if you wanted to. Most people don't kill 10, but nonetheless, it's shock and awe, and that's what these state managers want it to be. They want us to understand now that they were opposed all along, but now they have the reins, and it's going to be very, very difficult to take the reins away from them. And they're just going to keep doing more of the same. The wolves will hang on, but I'm absolutely, you know, I spend a lot of time running trail cameras, and I also network with a lot of individuals around the state of Idaho. And I certainly don't believe the numbers are out there that the state claims they believe we have. They say, you know, 1,500 wolves plus or minus. But in the areas where I was doing the collaring, both as when I was working for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then when I retired, I was helping Idaho Fish and Game. Places where there were a dozen wolf packs when I was working in the field, maybe a pack or two today. And I have friends who routinely go into the Frank Church, spend 18 days at a time and hike through the whole wilderness area. They virtually see no evidence of wolves whatsoever. You know, and that's supposed to be one of our fallback areas where if the wolves get hammered on the outer edges, there's always supposed to be this reserved number of wolves in the Frank Church. But the people I know that go back there and the amount of hiking they do, and they're very knowledgeable about wildlife, they see a lot of elk, they see a lot of deer, they see a lot of bighorn sheep, but they certainly don't see nearly no evidence of wolves back there. So the wilderness is not full of wolves.
No.
But again, I don't know. I mean, culture and tradition dominate right now, and the wolves are on their own totally to maintain their numbers. But how you wrestle back control, that's a tall order.
I think the only place that I know of in the state where we have had consistent presence of wolves has been in our Wood River Wolf Project area, and that's largely because the county government doesn't allow for trapping and snaring of wolves in the county. It's the only place in the state where there's some respite from that, and it's you know, we've been lucky to have some consistency with the wolves that are in the project area. They've survived. They've been more like the wolves from the Yellowstone region, where, you know, they've been able to be wolves rather than to be under persecution the whole time. And it just makes no sense, because these non-lethal tools are not hard to use. I mean, livestock guardian dogs, certain times of the year, they can be tricky. We have to keep them away from den sites because wolves are very territorial, and they kind of look at the livestock guardian dogs as being funny looking wolves. And so strange wolves are the biggest threat to their pups in the springtime. So we have to be careful, you know, make sure that we're not using the dogs too close to the den sites or rendezvous sites. But that's something you just learn. And so you use other tools that time of year. We have things like fox lights and air horns and carcass removal, and, you know, all just human presence, you know, being near the livestock. And we're not the only ones doing this, but it's the longest running demonstration project of its kind anywhere, I think anywhere in the country, possibly anywhere in North America. And we're seeing this project duplicated in other places around the world. People get it. This stuff it's just a retooling of how we approach our relationship with nature. So it's certainly possible and really not that hard to coexist with wolves. And I'm hoping that states like Colorado, who, by the way, today might be getting, or tomorrow, another group of wolves coming in from British Columbia to be released in Colorado this week. So, you know, history is
Yay.
repeating itself in a different state. So, you know, that's ways that we can all help support this, you know, making sure that we're engaged in our local state commissions, the wildlife commissions. Go online, you can Google those, find out when the meetings are, go and meet the people that are there. Speak up when you go. You usually get 2 or 3 minutes to talk. Run for commission seats, run for local offices. There's lots of ways that you can be involved in helping get the word out. But I think we have to let people know across the country what's happening here in Idaho, because it won't stop here. We're seeing a push to drive this same type of bounty program, which is funded in part by our state and other parts by these big, like Safari Club, I think, and other large pro-hunting trophy organizations that they're pushing into Montana. They've been trying to go into Wyoming, and they've got billboards up all over our state right now, trying to kill more wolves. I don't know when enough is going to be enough for them. I think when they're all gone.
There isn't.
Yeah.
There isn't. They've turned it into a profitable situation. They're making money. I think one thing we have to maybe be careful of, and I'm a cockeyed optimist, always have been. I think we have to be careful of getting complacent and getting depressed on this thing and realizing how bad it is. Well, okay, we're still in the same fight. Fight hasn't changed. The war hasn't changed. Suzanne, you're a great leader. Your dedication should be as catching as anything. I think we all have a job to do. We need to just join hands and keep fighting. What else are we going to do?
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit down and let them win. They might beat me, but they're not going to take it away from me. Not without me fight. Not without the fight.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be exposed thoroughly.
Oh,
You know, people are
sure,
mentioning things like Outside Magazine and the New York Times, and you know, it's hard to document this stuff, but it's in writing. You know, we've got it straight from the state. So, and I know that they're getting ready to again go on to Nez Perce ceded lands, and they've done this every year now for almost a dozen years, where they go in and kill wolves, whole packs of wolves, where there are no livestock at all, zero livestock, and they just go in and kill every wolf that they can find. And it's just, there is no justification for it. We have greater elk herd numbers today than we did when wolves were restored in 1995 and 1996. We have greater elk and deer hunter success throughout most of the state. There's been historic records that have been at least reached in the last few years. And it's not about the elk. It's not about hunting, and it's not about the livestock, because we have less than 0.1% of livestock being affected by wolves in the state. It is really about the politics and about the prejudice that people bring when they have this passion for hating the species. So anything that we can do, I think, to help spread the word and highlight what's happening here with them. And a lot of attention goes to other places, but this Idaho wolf population is precious for a lot of reasons. First, they're the same wolves that went to Yellowstone, right? Same families of wolves. It's the same region, and these wolves grew so large in population size that at one time that they were the ones that dispersed to places like Oregon and Washington, California. So if you have wolves in those other states, they all came from Idaho. And yet
Yep.
so much of this isn't known. So I'm still looking through
Well,
questions.
we brought them here.
Yeah, yeah. Go
We
ahead.
brought them here, and it's our job to protect them.
Marcy, here's a question. If the Nez Perce have their own sovereign territory, can they legally protect wolves within it? I don't know if you can answer that.
Good question.
I believe so. I think, you know, we have our own property. Of course, we could protect wolves within our own property, but, you know, we haven't gone there with regard to at least our treaty, you know, and what's within the treaty, which, you know, what we could use as protection of species within the treaty. I mean, we have it's language in there that says we can hunt, gather, and fish on usual and accustomed lands. But I don't know why we couldn't, you know, reverse that and say, you know, hunt, fish, conserve, you know, within our ceded lands. And I mean, that almost covers the entire recovery area in Idaho. But I don't know, we just we have not pushed it, and it's disappointing. You know, I'm not in wildlife anymore, so I can't really, you know, push that ahead, but yeah, I think we should.
Do you think there's a possibility, Marcy, of maybe talking to some people or to kind of push this idea a little bit, or to assist in some ways?
You know, it's we have a council right now that is kind of removed from wolf recovery, and it's kind of because they weren't here, you know, at that time, not like Pete Hayes or Alan Pinkham or, you know, Levi Holt, those old timers that were all for it. You know, those elders are gone and past, you know, so it's
Horace Axel.
Yeah, Horace. So we don't really have the voice for, you know, for wolf recovery and I'm the only one left, and I'm not even in wildlife. So it's a hard, you know, I know that the current director is trying to do something, but, you know, he's understaffed, and, you know, I think if we kind of pulled together as a tribe, we could probably do something, and, you know, that's my hope, but
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough.
It's very
And-
tough.
And there's so few people that
Marcy,
actually...
Excuse me. You know, Marcy, we had that wolf center up on the Nez Perce for quite a while, and it was meant to be a center for education and everything, and I think it did well in its time. It became a little bit controversial, and it got to be more about people than it was about wolves, unfortunately. But we were very close to the wildlife people then. The wolf people were. I'm wondering if we should maybe try to renew some of that relationship. Would that be of assistance, do you think? Would that be something that would help, or get in the way?
I don't think it couldn't hurt.
Yeah. We've been to a lot of the tribal meetings. In fact, we've had a lot of discussions. You know, Sam Penny was involved with the time during the reintroduction, and so there's still a lot of outreach that's been going on there, and they've been tremendously supportive. We just had a rally in Washington, D.C. in September where we had a lot of tribal leaders that were there, including from the Nez Perce. So the voices are powerful, and it is, I think there is a lot of interest in hearing from those folks, but of course the tribes, like everyone else, have so many pressures. It's a matter of trying to really help bring this story of wolves back out and helping to expose what the state of Idaho is doing to them. You know, people just don't know, and we have to find a way to get that information out. Newspaper, radio, whatever it is, telling the story, to make sure that people do know that this isn't going to go on in the dark anymore.
We need to appeal to the youth.
Yeah. And we are, and that's another big part of the work that we're doing is to the youth. I'm going to share, as we're getting close to the end here, I'm going to share a little bit more about the Wood River project itself, just so you guys can kind of get an idea of the type of terrain that we're working in. It's very similar to places you see in Colorado or Montana, or the Alps. but very rugged country. And this is where the project is. We have 1,200 square kilometers that we cover every summer, uh, throughout the entire summer grazing season for when there are sheep on the landscape. It is a beautiful, beautiful area, and a lot of the heroes behind the scenes, some of them are four-legged. They're the livestock guardian dogs, which have been tremendous allies. We have usually about 3 to 5 dogs per band, and the bands are up to probably 1,000 to 1,500 sheep in each of the bands. And the reason, of course, that we are working on this is that we're trying to get this next generation to understand that if you're going to have things like livestock on the landscape, and that is a decision to make, that you have to also have these tools and methods there that help protect the native wildlife, help protect the native landscape. And having these students involved has been tremendous. So we are starting this again this year, where we'll have the kids out doing the tracking and monitoring of the wolves, as well as helping us to look over where the wolves, where the sheep operations are going. And this project now, year 17, we just finished. We're going into year 18. This is the map of Idaho, where you see the kind of the conflict map, and that less than 4 or less than 5 is our average per year. You can see what's happening in the other parts of the state where there's a lot larger number of sheep, livestock being killed. And it's because these methods aren't in place. Really, there's a very few people that are actually implementing these types of tools because they're not required to do so. In other states like Oregon and Washington, there's an actual requirement for them to have these non-lethal tools, proactive methods in place, so that they can qualify for things like compensation, or even having the wolves removed. You can't do that if you haven't put a good faith effort into these coexistence techniques. You can find the first write-up of our paper from the 2017 Journal of Mammalogy. It's online, it's free to access. But what we've learned with this project is that killing wolves, it doesn't help resolve problems. We've had our neighbors who are having greater losses still, when they're using these lethal control methods rather than using the non-lethal. They're still going to be losing a lot more livestock. It promotes illegal killing of wolves. It doesn't increase tolerance. We've seen that from a lot of the research that's come out in recent years. And it doesn't result in fewer livestock losses, which we've said. It doesn't, it destabilizes the wolf packs and the populations. And those destabilized packs are the ones that end up often resorting to killing livestock, because it's often the kids that are left behind, the teenagers, and without having the adults in place, livestock may be the thing that they turn to, just trying to survive. So having a stable wolf pack in place is really helpful. We also know that wolves play a huge beneficial role in the ecosystem health and resilience. We've got to get these messages out to people, why it's important to have wolves across the landscape, that they influence elk and deer herds using the landscape in a much more positive way. They help reduce disease and help kill these major diseases that are threatening the elk and deer populations. And that wolves on the landscape is a big part of quality of habitat, that they're helping to protect biodiversity and helping to sustain that in a healthy long-term way. So we, have to start talking about the values that we have as well. I mean, I think we hear about the values from the livestock industry all the time, that they want to protect their livestock, and we're offering them ways to do that, but also understanding that killing wolves is taking the life of these intelligent keystone species, that they feel pain, that they care about their family, that they suffer loss. And, it's not just a human thing to have those emotions. And I think we've got to start talking about that kind of thing. It's like we've put these species in a box and then didn't allow them to have the same quality of being, the same passions for life that we have. And that's not okay. That is something we've got to evolve beyond. The mass killing of wolves is rooted in misinformation and bias, and we have to push back against it. And as humans, we need a new way to live with nature instead of working against her all the time. This is a common scene across the West, right? But these are also people, they're with range riders, they're out there working the land, and they're protecting the grizzly that live back there in those mountains, the wolves that live there. They're trying to make a good effort of it, and they are succeeding. There are ways to do this both. So if you want to help the Wood River Wolf Project, I'm going to send you guys links. Please consider supporting this project. It's locally funded. We don't get state money the way that that these lethal control programs, they're all funded heavily by the state. And so we need people to support projects like this. There's the Wood River Project in Idaho. There's the Blackfoot Challenge in Montana. There's other ones around the country, and we'll send you guys links to everything. So if you do want to help support these efforts, please know that they absolutely rely on your donations, because we don't get these big government grants and the support that the money that I think Idaho's spending $1 million a year just to kill wolves. $1 million against.
Totally heartbreaking.
It's more than they spend on education.
Yeah, it is more. Yeah. So I want to thank everybody.
Great work.
Any last comments that you guys have? Anything that you'd like to leave us with? Would really appreciate your last thoughts here. And Roy, you're never speechless.
Did you volunteer me again, did you?
I did. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think for one thing, your words, Suzanne, are excellent. They're true, they're meaningful, and I think it should be an inspiration. I think the thing that we need to do now is to remember who we are, and that what we did was wonderful. We brought these wolves here. We bucked a lot of odds. We had more people against us then than we do now. And now we just need to change the things so that they're protected and taken care of. And the plans are in force. And I think a lot of this is going to fall on us. So somehow or the other, we need to get together. We need to get together more often. And mainly because we like each other, for one thing. And we can make good things happen. So that's my final word on it.
All right. So Roy's signing up to volunteer.
Sally, you're next.
You said it too well. I couldn't agree more. It's in education. I don't know exactly what to say about how to focus it in and wake people up. I don't know what that's going to take. And that really bothers me.
And it's going to take meetings like this, I think. It really is amazing to me. We had 400 people register for this meeting, and I think people care. It's a matter of giving everyone a direction to go. And for goodness sake, we have to stop the territorialness between NGOs and start working together. You know, really start pulling together in a way that creates that synergy, that creates a movement, a wave. So we've got our work cut out for us, but we're not going to give up.
Nope.
Yeah, we're here to stay. Anything else, Carter? Marcy? Lynn, are you still with us?
I am, yes.
Lynn,
Yeah.
were you aware of all this stuff happening in the state?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I still pay attention. So yeah, I mean, I'm aware of what's going on. I actually intersect still with it because for years I've hunted out of Lava Lake Ranch, which has been involved with they've used guard dogs quite a lot and have had predator friendly operations going. And yeah.
They're part of the Wood River Wolf Project, the Lava Lake Ranch. Yeah.
Right, they would be. Yeah. So yeah, I wasn't sure what the bounty situation is, but yeah, I know from work I've done with Fish and Game that basically their board has directed their biologists to put a lot of resources into counting wolves so they could have an excuse to kill more of them. That was pretty much understood. I think a lot of the biologists on the ground don't necessarily agree with what's going on, and but they're certainly directed by the commissioners.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you know, and that's, reaching out to other reporters and stuff would be, I think, people just, I don't think they have a clue. I really don't even think people in Idaho have a clue of what's happening here. So the more we can talk, get the word out, start doing more educational outreach with them and really exposing what's happening here. It is probably the only way that this is going to turn around. And we owe it to these wolves. We brought them here. We are responsible. And I think that we have to find a way to help protect them before it's too late. And for many, it already is.
I'll just remind
I
people
don't like to hear that.
Go ahead, Carter.
so much of what's going on these days is directed by the legislatures. That's where the walking orders are coming from. I know a lot of Idaho Fish and Game people too that I don't think their heart's in any of this, but they don't really have a say. And the legislatures, Idaho and Montana are the worst examples I could imagine talking about change happening, because these are blood red states, and the Republicans have always made it clear they were not wolf friendly whatsoever. I think watching what's going on in Idaho and Montana can be very instructive for people living in other states, because you still have a chance to disallow this kind of having the legislature steering your ship for you. I don't really see, with that no judicial review decision by Congress for Idaho, Montana, they're kind of doomed, in my opinion. But like Marcy has mentioned, I think coming at it from a tribal viewpoint could be an Achilles heel. Because anymore, I'm always looking for the Achilles heel that shows me a weak point, and it's the tribes, and it is smart lawyers, I guess, lawsuits that are well executed, well directed, and targeted. So, other than that, don't be discouraged by what goes on in Idaho and Montana, but be encouraged what you can do to control wolf management in these other states, because you do, I believe, have avenues and open doors.
Good words, Carter. Yep.
Marcy, you want to take us home?
It seems like, when the tribe was, chest deep in wolf recovery, of course, we had those folks that were always, negative and against wolf recovery. But I do think, though, that, at that time we had, all of our crew on the ground, and we were building those relationships and doing that education out on the ground and inviting, those people to come to our trap line or come to our, where we might have a wolf down to, view a wolf up close. And that's not happening anymore. I mean, it's the Fish and Game. They don't tell us anything. They don't tell anybody anything except for, maybe what the data or the statistics you're getting, but that type of relationship building is not happening. And those were relationships with, those factions of folks that were, had their livestock out there that had a change maybe, and were potentially sharing that you know, change in thought process about wolves with their family, their friends, whatever, you know, and that's just not happening anymore. And I don't know how we start doing that. I mean, you guys are obviously doing that down there in the Wood River area, but that's not happening up here, especially in the Clearwater, you know. And I don't know how you do that without, you know, funding. I mean, in fisheries, we're up against the same with, you know, restoration of salmon and steelhead. You know, we want to breach the dams, and that's what we're having to do, is educate people and kind of make friends and, you know, discuss the pros and cons and, you know, those types of things. And I think that's what we need to get back to for wolves. I know I don't think they stand a chance unless we can reach across the aisle and, you know, show them that they're not the big bad wolf, and that people still think that they're going to, their kid's going to be taken at the bus stop. So anyway, that's my 5 cents.
Little Red Riding Hood lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
I'm not giving up. And
I
I
know.
know that the people on this call are not giving up. And I know that there's a lot of people in the tribe that are not giving up. We've got to just start building our community and lock hands with everybody. That we had 400 people register for this. And I know we can't see all of your faces out there, but we can feel you. And the amount of questions and the support, we know you're behind us. So let's just make this happen.
Organize. Let's organize.
Yeah. And
Let's organize.
let people know.
Get directed.
And Roy, you've got to get
Yes,
that
ma'am.
song. You've got to get that song "Little Paw" out to people. They need to hear it. It's a wonderful song.
I think you're
and I
right.
think-
Maybe it's time I did. Maybe it's
Yep.
time I did.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure. I'll do it.
Okay. You wouldn't sing it for us now, would you?
Not on your life.
It's just the best song.
I haven't sang it for probably a year or more, and I would want to do it at least once. Hey, you remember a couple of my failures, like Eugene, Oregon?
Sorry, please don't bring that up. Yes.
when
Yeah.
we were in an auditorium that holds 800 people, the biggest auditorium we've ever been in, we had 27 people show up.
Oh, I think there were only 17, Roy.
Oh, you could be. I was trying to make it look a little better, and I
Yeah.
forgot the words to the song.
Yeah.
You forgot what you were talking about.
Well,
Yeah, let's
yeah.
don't do that one again.
Yeah, but please get Little Paw running again. And we also know that there's things happening, like Leonardo DiCaprio and Jane Goodall have come together. They're going to be producing a wolf film. We're hoping very much that they help expose what's happening here, that they reach out to the tribe, to the Nez Perce, and that they really help tell this story. So there are ways to make this happen. We just can't forget them, and they have to stay on our radar. They have to be important to us all. Or else we'll lose them again. And that's not happening on my watch. So,
Nope. We're with you. We're with you.
thank you guys. We're over time now, but I just wanted to say thanks so much to our speakers and for sharing the stories and the information and the pictures. And Glenn, that was wonderful to see images I haven't seen before. So thanks for, doing that with us. And Carter, hang in there. We're gonna, I hope, I still have hope now. All right.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. We'll send you out an
Okay.
email that has a link to this and a way for you to help share with other people. So that'll be coming to your email box tomorrow. Thank you, Allison, for pulling all of this together and running this smoothly. We were just very much indebted to all of you folks. You give us hope. You're the wind beneath our wings. And we hope you have a wonderful night on this beautiful wolf moon. Take care.
Thank you,
Take
Suzanne.
care.